Hi everyone, welcome to Straight Talk. This evening's topic is queer parents and parents of queer children. My name is Sheena Sanders-Smead. I'm going to be a moderator and one of the panelists tonight. I just want to say welcome to everyone in the audience. We have potentially state representatives, the select board, Scituate Public School superintendent and principals, the Mariner, and the Scituate community. Welcome everyone. What is Scituate Pride? Our mission is to inspire, support, and make visible a thriving LGBTQIA+ community in Scituate. We aim to elevate inclusivity, equity, and awareness and celebrate the lives of our LGBTQIA+ community members. We foster values that strengthen connections and belonging among LGBTQIA+ people while advocating and educating to build a strong alliance with the greater Scituate community. Scituate Pride is welcoming to all people, including allies and families of our LGBTQIA+ community. Scituate Pride is now a nonprofit organization. If you love what we're doing, you can donate at situatepride.com. There's also this QR code on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen that can be used for donations. And also, if you'd like to use Venmo, we have the name at Scituate Pride that you can use. Anything counts, and thanks in advance for that consideration. What is Straight Talk? A quarterly discussion with a panel of neighbors on their queer experiences in Scituate. Tonight's theme again is queer parents and parents of queer children. And our next Straight Talk will be coming up in February. We have one per quarter, and this is our second one. Terminology. What is LGBTQIA+? We have L, lesbian, gay is for G, bisexual is for B, transgender/trans for T, queer/questioning for Q, I is intersex, A is asexual/aromantic, and the plus is anything else like pansexual, non-binary, two-spirit, demisexual, and more. It's not an exhaustive list. This slide here is recognizing family diversity. Families are made up of many different dynamics and different people. So we just listed some of them here. Again, it's not all. So we have mom, dad, aunt, uncle, foster parent, dad, two moms, a dad and a stepmother, mom and stepdad, two dads, mom and mom's boyfriend, girlfriend, grandparents, grandma, grandpa. So just to recognize that families are all different and it's all about love. They have the same, that's what's in common. It's all about love. Some of the ground rules for tonight. We have a safe space statement. How the discussion will go. Panelists share their stories. Audience is muted. The chat is disabled until the Q&A starts. During the Q&A portion, chatted questions go directly to the hosts. Disrespectful language will not be tolerated. We have Stephanie Burke on security tonight. She will be retrieving audience questions. Anything that's sent to her will sent in the chat will go directly to her, and then she'll field questions to me as we go through the panel discussion. This is a safe space. Those who participate in this group are supportive of the LGBTQIA+ community and individuals, respectful of who they are and their sexual orientation, whether they identify as a member of the LGBTQIA+ global community or not. It is essential that all who attend be mindful of the sensitive nature of discussing sexual orientation. So to start, we can meet our panelists. Again, I'm Sheena Sanders-Smead, your moderator, and I'm also a panelist tonight. I identify as a butch lesbian woman and mom. We have Itai Halevi. He's a cisgendered father of a gay son. We have Julie Flanagan, cisgendered mom of trans daughter. Lori Swart, cisgendered mother of trans son. And Mark Generazio, father of two children. We want to thank our corporate sponsors tonight. We have Lenny's Hideaway, The Workout Club, Amy Martin Landscape Design, McGrath PR, Spotlight Music and Theater Academy, Tacklebox Fishing School, and Damali Consulting so far for tonight. You can learn more about giving at situatepride.com. And I just want to thank you again for being here tonight. We look forward to our discussion. So to start, we're going to go through biographies for each panelist, and then we'll ask pointed questions, and the conversation will flow from there to share some experiences tonight. We have Scituate Pride for Facebook. We have Instagram, Snapchat. I'm actually not my generation is more just Facebook. So we have info@situatepride.com as well, just for ways to get in contact with us and find out what's going on with Situate Pride. I'm gonna stop sharing. All right. So first we'll start with me. I'll do my bio. If I can find it. Let's do it. 1 second, sorry. Okay, too many papers around. So again, I'm Sheena Sanders Smead. I've lived in Scituate for almost 5 years. I'm married to Nikki Sanders Smead, and we have 2 children, Christopher and Ty. Christopher is 11, and Ty will be 4 in January. I met Nikki when Christopher turned 5. After we were married, we wanted to live in a coastal town. I grew up in Onset, Wareham, by the water, so I definitely wanted to be by the ocean, and so did Nikki. So we looked for a town that had that, but also a great public school system, and we landed on Scituate. We have friends here that we know, the Tondorfs, who said it was a great place to live, beautiful, great people. So they definitely pulled us in, and we came and had dinner on the harbor at the Mill Wharf, and we're hooked since, so that made our decision for us. As an LGBTQI parent in this town, and as a parent of Black children, I do have concerns living here as we've resided here. I was called a dyke by a passing truck on my front lawn on Beaver Dam one day, and things kind of snowballed from there. I was just spreading grass seed and heard that, and I was caught pretty off guard, but then I did realize what he said, and I told Nikki about it, and she, of course, reported it to the cops, and they were very responsive. I wasn't even that concerned, but because I'm used to just letting things roll off, but I was like, this is my house. They know where I live, so we got to do something about it. And from there, we experienced people offering support and standing with us on what happened. In town, I've also been approached, asked if I'm a babysitter for my daughter, because she's Black and I'm white. And I've had to kind of explain things a little bit to people here and there. I've also experienced prejudice, I believe, based on my parents. Just down at the harbor in Scituate, had a big issue one day with one of the workers there and the manager. Also, I felt like I was treated that way at the town hall even. But I did escalate things, especially when I was at the town hall. And I have to say, I appreciate how they handled it. They were very responsive, and I appreciate the support we're getting from the town to work on things and make Scituate a better place to live for all people here. Nikki, so as far as being a parent, Nikki physically had Ty and Christopher. I knew I wanted to be a mom, but I can barely get my blood drawn. So as you can imagine, I don't think I'd be the best pregnant lady or I wouldn't handle it too well. I've been told that I could do it, but I don't know about that. I give all moms credit for sure who have the child physically. My friends were completely supportive of me. They always have been. And when I became a stepmother to Christopher, they were also very supportive. And when Nikki and I we had in vitro to have Ty too. Almost everyone who was invited came to my baby shower except for my brother. Unfortunately, I've lost family relationships due to the lack of acceptance of me and my family, not only for being a gay person in a family, but also the fact that I've married a Black woman and I have Black children, unfortunately. It's very sad. I'm lucky enough to have a wonderful grandmother who loves me and my family, and I have my closest best friends that are sisters and aunties to my children. I do believe that negativity I have experienced from my family would absolutely not have been experienced if I were straight. So far in Scituate, in the school system, I've not had any bad experiences because I'm not quite there yet. My daughter's a little young, although my involvement, it's been limited because Christopher has another mother who I try to stay in my lane and I jump in when I have the opportunity out of respect for her. The good surely outweighs the bad, I have to say. We probably would not have Situate Pride here now and everything that's been done so far if something bad didn't happen. So sometimes when the bad things happen, good follows suit. It warms my heart to work with so many activists in town and people who are supportive and are fighting for tolerance and unity and diversity despite voices that speak and act against it here. And I'm very proud of my wife for all that she's doing. And I know things will only evolve for the better for us, our children, and all citizens of Scituate. And thank you for hearing my bio. So next we have Itai.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Itai Halevi. I am Lauren Allismith's husband. She's one of the coordinators and founders of Situate Pride. Lauren and I first moved to Scituate by accident in '96. We had decided that we were going to be adults and mature, and that mature adults buy a house. And so we started looking for a house, and we fell off a map. We bought one of these cheap gas station maps, and we arrived in Scituate in a rented car, and we said, "What is this place? It's magically beautiful. It's not on the map." And through a series of fortunate events, we ended up buying a house down on Egypt Beach first, and then we lived for a while on Jericho in a rented place, and now we're in the old Crazy Purple house. If you've been here a while, you'll know what that refers to, but we're right next to Jenkins on First Parish. I think one of the things that attracted us to Scituate initially was the fact that it seemed to be a town where everyone had a live and let live attitude. So the fact that we were two city folks, with attitude, just moving in town, and we weren't bothered, and the neighbors accepted us, and everyone just kind of kept to themselves. Fast forward, we decided to have kids, and we had Kyle, and then a year and a half later we had Evan. Now, Evan, right from the get-go, did not conform to male gender stereotypes. He always, he liked wearing dresses. He preferred sparkly things and playing with dolls. And, he was an interesting personality. And I remember, I grew up in a secular Jewish household all over the place. And I considered myself liberal and progressive and all that stuff. And I was surprised to find myself having these sudden concerns, like, should I try to steer him into more boyish stuff, or is this okay? And I was surprised by my own reaction to some degree. Lauren was a great help in helping me get over it to a large extent, because ultimately both our concern was making sure that Evan was happy in himself. And what those early years really made me realize the extent to which the notion of masculinity that I'd incorporated into my own being was literally what we now call toxic masculinity. There was a range of emotions that Evan would express, that I was like, is that right for a kid, for a boy to do, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Is it okay that he's having fun wearing a dress or wearing sparkly colors? I remember we'd go shopping for clothes and he'd make a beeline for the girls section. And I remember having that conflict in my head saying, I want him to be happy, but come on, I can't be standing in here in the girls section while my son is picking up purple pants and sparkly tops. But again, the problem was not with him. The problem was with me. And so Evan, being who he is, has given me an opportunity to really face myself and learn more about myself. That said, I grew up in the 80s, and when I came to the States in 81 and as a young teen, gay bashing was in the news all the time. I didn't have much exposure to the gay community growing up, but I remember in the news hearing about around the Fenway, there'd be a lot of gay bashing attacks, gay people being jumped and beaten up, and that was a common violence that was occurring in the city. And so I always recognized that being gay in our society was dangerous. And when Evan, I had sort of accepted him as who he was, and he hadn't come out as gay to me, but I knew that he was not gender typical. And I remember being afraid, for him in school. Like, will he get beat up by the other kids? Will the teachers make fun of him? I used to have teachers make fun of me for my name, when I first came here. And so my memories of school were not entirely positive to begin with. What I discovered was Evan went to Jenkins, and his teachers were so accepting of him as he was. He never spoke of any instructor who had made him feel bad. And, the school administration was, always supportive of him. He was involved in the music program early on, and every music instructor was able to appreciate him for his talent and not pay attention to really the stuff that didn't matter, and so moving forward, high school, I was very worried because, high school kids can tend to be pretty negative. But somehow by the time he got to high school, he had such self-assurance and a sense about himself that he really didn't talk about any issues. He recognized the homophobia in the hallways, and he identified certain cliques of kids who carried a negative attitude that he probably wanted to steer clear of, not because he was in fear, but because just he didn't want, why would you be around that, but I have to say, the fears that I carry for him have more to do with the potential for violence against him. He's an incredible human being who has taught me so much that the fact of him being gay it's like, that's not the issue. The problem is society for me. And I still have those fears, that he's going to be turned away from a job interview for being who he is, that he's going to get beaten up, when he goes away to college, what's going to happen. But the experience in Scituate has been positive for me as his parent. Yeah, I'm sure, if you have questions for me, I'll get to them, but I don't want to take up too much time. So.
All right, thank you, Itai. Next we have Julie Flanagan. We need to get her off mute. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good evening. So I have lived in Situate for the last 14 years. Used to come here to visit an aunt when I was a kid, and moved here when our kids were starting elementary school. I have two kids, one who's a senior in high school right now at Scituate High, and the other is a 20-year-old transgender daughter attending school in New York. My experience here in Scituate with a parent of a kid who didn't conform wasn't always comfortable. I think, from the get-go, so my daughter is Mia. She spoke in August at the last Straight Talk. And I think that, because she didn't always fit in, we weren't always included in, a lot of different social circles. But once she was always a little bit non-conforming, similar to Evan's experience. I think probably one of the happiest moments I ever saw was when she was 3 and we got her Halloween costume and she was dressed up as Cinderella, and she just was, couldn't have been happier. So over the years, though, I think, maybe subliminally we tried to suppress some of that, or it was just, a part of society that, she, played hockey. But definitely when she got to high school, you could see there was a struggle. And initially she came out as gay, but by junior year, she was, feeling something very different, and told us at that point that she was transgender. we spent 6 months with her trying to figure out how to do this socially. Initially at home, it was getting used to pronouns. I have to say, the youth of this generation are amazing, because from the get-go, her brother, who's always been pretty, strong in his opinions, sometimes, maybe a little bit more masculine, but from the get-go, never questioned her new name or her new pronoun. He never flubbed up when the rest of us did. So when we had to send her back to school her senior year, we did debate about how she would feel going back there. And I think one of the things that kind of made it easier for her was that Ms. Kimball had transitioned earlier that spring. And I think the acceptance from at least the principal made Mia feel very comfortable. I since learned that not everybody in the school was in the faculty was as accepting, and if they did mess up her pronouns, it was kind of brushed off, which, it's hard to explain to people, but it really is part of their identity. And, by not embracing it and, correcting it and saying, I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to do that, just continues to marginalize, because it's really important for them, where they've struggled so long to come to this decision and come out, and to be pushed back again. It's really hard, because especially for transgender kids, when they walk in the room, they're always looking around knowing I'm the only one like me here. So I think that's an important thing that why I have become more of an ally for transgender, and part of that is from Mia, but because Mia has very high standards for those in her life, and she wants us all to understand and appreciate, but also to advocate for what it's like to be transgender. So this has made me step very much out of my comfort zone. I don't like being in the spotlight, but I really feel that it's very important that I speak up as her parent, and to be an advocate for not just transgender, but all LGBTQIA, because it's not an easy life to have this. I always say nobody chooses to live like this, and being out makes you so much more of a target. Yeah. And, similar to Itai's comments, as a mother, the thing that worries me the most about her is her safety. Not gonna lie, the average lifespan for a trans woman is 35 to 40, and a lot of that is, health related and violence. And those are some things that I think we need to make better well known, because I feel that a lot of people think, like, once Mia found out where she was on the spectrum, it was great. But it's not. I mean, her struggle is just, her struggle to be accepted was just beginning. And I think, so again, like I said, as allies, I think we also need to advocate. And a part of that is just an education process. I do respect the privacy of people who don't want to be seen as one thing or another, but I think overall as a community, we need to better educate and learn about what it means to be LGBTQIA, and so that anybody can feel accepted and loved here. Because Mia transitioned 3 years ago, and I have been waiting as a community for like more acceptance and safe spaces, but it hasn't. It's really limited very much to these these small sections at the high school and the middle school. And I think as a community, I'd like to see more of that. So that's my piece.
Thank you, Julie. I just want to stop for a second before moving on to Lori. Scituate TV is here tonight, and they're recording this session, so I just wanted everyone to know that, okay, in case there's an issue, if you have an issue with that. And next we'll go with Lori Swart. Just have to unmute her. There we
Hello.
Go.
So yeah, my name's Lori. I grew up in Situate. I guess you could say I'm a native. I don't know if people go townie. Went to Wampatuck, Gates, SHS. lived away in Boston here and around for most of college, kind of found my way back to Scituate. Didn't think I was going to end up here. I don't know where I thought I was going to end up, but I didn't think I was going to end up back in Scituate. I got married. We have 2 kids. My oldest is 20. My oldest son is 20, went, same schools, went through SHS, and my youngest is 17, currently a senior at SHS, and although working remotely, and is transgender, came out, female to male, came out sophomore year, right before Christmas, right before the Christmas break, publicly at school. To us, it was much sooner. Probably somewhere around 6th grade, I think it started to be gender, questioning, kind of get that first short haircut, thinking I'm going to be George Harrison, was fascinated with the Beatles, kind of starting to dress more masculine, and just by 8th grade, trying on a different name, different pronouns, they, them, and, so it wasn't, I can't say it was 100% shock to us, but the building of it was, it was a little, what do I do with this information? I'm still learning every day, but I think in the beginning stages, off the top of my head here, it was very isolating and lonely to be a parent with all this, new information and no real resources or connections or support. So for the most part, I felt like I kicked this a lot around in my head, whether it was out on a walk or on a run or just like sitting by myself, I would kick this information around and didn't, really know, had no outlet for it. And I just didn't really see any end in sight for me to know that I would feel good about this or know, how to handle it. I definitely withdrew, from some friendships and social obligations. I just didn't have the energy for it. It was just kind of hard to put myself out there and try to, just be me, I guess. What I didn't know at that time, which I know now, that it does get better. It's not going to be like that forever. And I was really fortunate to have Julie Flanagan connect me with a transgender parent group, a support group. And I think we had our first Zoom early in this or late spring. And I will tell you, after that first meeting, it was like this relief for me that I was not alone in my feelings. It was okay that I felt upset, or I felt a sense of loss, or I felt, frustration. I just to have that connection with these other people, it just, it made me realize that, okay, we're not alone, these feelings are valid, and I still have some of those feelings, but it's definitely better. My views and thoughts have definitely evolved since my child came out. For me, it's probably been close to about 3 years now, I'd say, of me solidly, change of name, he, him. I don't screw up too often. I'm pretty good at it. Here and there, people might make a mistake and we just do our best. But, it's, I don't know, for me, I guess just like I'm learning through my child. He's educated me on a lot of aspects. And so I think I'm fortunate for that. I've had my share of maybe insensitive seeming comments or questions, but it's, coming from a place of me not fully understanding, or being educated on it. So to that end, I read what I can, understand, ask questions, and just, try to be doing my part. Like when I say I've evolved, in the beginning, I couldn't fathom the idea of hormones and surgeries and things like that. I just was like I just couldn't get behind that. I just didn't really understand it. But when you see your child struggling on a daily basis, with gender dysphoria, and, like any parent, if your child has something that's affecting them every single day, you want to do what you can, whatever you can, to fix that. You want to just try to help them get through. So, yeah, so that's kind of the path that we're on. And, you know, school's been a bit of an issue for us. It's been a tough place. You know, I definitely want to applaud, like, a huge shout out to all the faculty that right from the get-go that got the memo of the name change and the pronouns. They just like didn't miss a beat. And that makes such a huge difference, you know, to, like Julie said, to have your student go in and be misgendered or, you know, have the wrong pronouns. It's kind of, for us, it was the change of, okay, I'm getting a text to pick my kid up in tears to come home because I just had the most miserable episode at the first part of the day, you know. I mean, and it was, some teachers, unfortunately, it was almost like an optional, you know, what am I going to say today? He, she. And then to make it worse, it could be like a overcorrecting of it in class, and that he. So of course that draws more attention and snickers and things like that, you know, which, I don't know, to be a kid in high school anyways is hard, but to be a kid in high school and come out as transgender and then have all your peers, you feel like you're on a spotlight, you know, I think it's even harder. So I don't know. I couldn't do it. I couldn't have done it. I don't know how. I just don't know how he's done it. But I have huge respect, and it's just really made me question, you know, I mean, gender, what the hell, you know. It's like you have a kid and nothing, the future is not written, I guess. You know, you're going into this life and you have your kids and you're saying, I've got a boy and a girl. Well, maybe, you know, but I mean, things can change. So, so for me right now, we're just, you know, focusing on getting through high school, finish out, get into the world. We see the horizon and, you know, we're getting there. So that's my story so far.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you very much. I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions as we go, please put them in the chat and we'll field them and put them forward. Our last bio from Mark Generazio.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Before I talk about me, I have to say that you parents with transgender children and gay children, I'm moved by the things that you're saying and the struggles that you're facing. It's, as a gay person, if I had parents like you back in the 80s and 90s, I think my life would have been a heck of a lot easier. I've been very moved by the things that you're concerned about, and I feel it, and I think you guys are incredibly courageous, and it's great to see having grown up gay in the time when it was difficult. You know, I had a lot of difficulty, and to see this kind of support and love that you have for your children is awesome. So they are very lucky children, not to mention very, very brave children. So that's great. I applaud you for that. I moved to Situate in 2013 with my husband, Thomas. He's Vietnamese, and we met back in 2006. We've been married for about 13 years. Yeah, 13 or 14. We met in Boston, and I was living in LA. I grew up in Texas. I knew I wanted a family, and I knew that was going to be a real challenge. And coming out in Los Angeles was great because I felt safe. I didn't feel safe doing that in Boston, which is why I went to California. But you know, after a decade in California, I knew that if I wanted to settle down and have a family and get married, Massachusetts was going to be that place. And because marriage was legal at that point. So I met Thomas, and then, you know, I kind of told him right away, I want children, and, you know, usually what I want, I get, you know. And I mean, I work at it, you know. So anyways, we got married, and then we had our oldest son, Jonathan. We adopted 2 boys, both through the state of Massachusetts. That was a personal choice to adopt through the foster care system. That was a real challenge at times. It was exhausting, but it was worth every minute, and I wouldn't change any of that experience. And so we had Jonathan, we moved to Vermont for a couple of years, which was a wonderful place to live, especially if you're a gay family with children. It was great, but then our jobs kind of took us back to Massachusetts, and we're trying to figure out where we would live. And Scituate, we landed in Scituate because it was my husband's, idea. My sister lives here, and she has been here for about 30 years. Her husband is born and raised in Scituate. So they have a child. So we thought, it was a couple of years older than our oldest son, Jonathan. And so we thought, well, let's move there. We'll have some family support. And of course, then I go on the census online and I'm looking at Scituate and I'm thinking, wow, this is gonna be really tough with, Vietnamese husband, Puerto Rican son, and gay family. And I thought, but my experience with Situate since we moved here in 2013 has been awesome. I haven't had any negative experience. The school systems were great. They're welcoming. Our neighbors were wonderful and welcoming. And I never, maybe I just didn't see it. If it was going on, I wasn't privy to it. But we've had a wonderful experience. I mean, it was a bit odd when we first came in the first few weeks of school, when I met other parents. They kind of already knew who I was. And, oh, I know where you live over here. And, I thought, well, how do they know all this? So I kind of felt like the token gay family just moved into town, and we changed the census a little bit. But it's been great. And, the last many years we've met, Nikki and Sheena and Tandorfs, and there are so many other gay families in this town, and it's awesome to see. But in terms of our experience as a gay family in Scituate, I've had no bad experiences. I do worry about the children, my boys, if they're going to be teased in school and things like that for having gay parents. I don't think they haven't discussed it with me at all, or Thomas, but yeah, we have. It's been I'm very fortunate. And, there was a couple of years ago I grew up in Texas, and I wanted to move back to Texas. And I think, I stopped pushing that notion. So now I just hang a Texas flag in my shed. But I stopped pushing that because I'm afraid to put that boys in a different setting, because we've been so lucky in Scituate, and I don't want to change that. Plus, I want my kids to stay in the same school system, unlike my experience growing up. But Scituate's been great, and I haven't had any or seen any issues until I hear some of these stories. And it, like Sheena, you mentioning someone yelling out "dyke," and it just blows my mind. Maybe I live under a rock, or I'm in denial or something. It's horrible to hear that. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, though, the response against that was just overwhelming in a good way. There was so many people that responded on the Situate Monthly page in support. And with all the political climate and everything that's been going on in the last, few years, I've been wanting to retreat and isolate into the woods somewhere with my family and just I don't know, build a bunker or something. But seeing that overwhelming support was okay, it's worth the fight. It's worth staying and trying to make things better around here. And it definitely gave us a lot of, for me, a lot of motivation to fight the good fight, so to speak. So I have, we don't have any questions from the audience yet, but we have some questions here. Panelists, feel free to jump in and offer any contribution you might have. I'll direct the question to one person, but then again, feel free to offer afterwards if you have something to say. So my first question here, I'll direct this to Julie. Does having a child, or gay or not, which we know your child is Mia, does it affect your understanding of your own gender and sexuality? Did it change your own biases, if you had them? And how have you grown as an individual?
So similar to Itali's comments about the biases, when she was younger, I really, wondered if it was okay for us to let her get, girl costumes at Halloween. And I don't know, I really, I think in the back of my, I kept thinking it was a stage that she was going to grow out of, right? But I always did try to leave the door open, if you will, of, if there was something that she was trying to figure out. So I was always very careful not to just, say that she always had to do boy things and everything. But I'm not going to lie, once she got to elementary school and started playing with other boys and playing hockey, I kind of did she was going to be okay. But, then watching, I think for me, what it's shown me about gender, and watching her transition is just how, as a cis person, how much I take all that stuff for granted, that I am comfortable in my skin because I know who I am, and to have to try to go through that, it really has changed my opinion about, and I'm starting to think more about how we are as people in terms of like evolving into, either one or another. And it doesn't have to always be conforming, as long as you can find this as long as you can find a place where you're comfortable to live, you know what I mean? And one thing that I was thinking about what Lori mentioned with the transparent group, it has, I felt the same sense of isolation when Mia first came out, and finding these other parents of trans kids. The thing that's been so fascinating to me is there's probably, I don't know, 15, 16 families that are involved with them, and every single one has a different story. Nobody has the same story as us. And I think that's really shows the continuum of the whole, I hesitate to use the word spectrum, but the whole rainbow, so that's kind of how it's been for me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have anything on this question?
The thing that comes to my mind is, not particularly a question, but it's always easy for me to hide my my sexuality because I'm a white male, right? So and I just cannot imagine the fear that these kids have. And even, I mean, now I think it's such a different world, but back when I grew up, how they must have had these, I mean, this isn't something new, right? So it's like, for me, I've been able to hide it and blend in and assimilate very easily. But for these kids, it just must be so difficult to be that experience. I can't wrap my head around.
To your point though, Mark, one of the things that I have found the most interesting about this, and I'm glad you brought that up, is that Mia grew up probably the best way you can in America, which is as a white middle-class suburban boy, right? And then when she changed, and so the world was her oyster. No one told her how to dress. No one told her what to say, how to speak, because that was how it was accepted. That was her cloak, if you will. And she has really, it's been interesting, Sheena, now that I'm listening to Mark, it's been really interesting for me that, I'm always very conscious about clothes that I wear as a woman. Like, I don't want to wear anything that's too provocative when I'm at work. I don't want to wear anything that might be, misread. And Mia doesn't care about that. And so when I say to her, like, oh, be careful, you don't want to wear, such and such kind of outfit, she gets mad at me. She's like, why are you telling me what to wear? And I think it's just, she's had that bringing up of like, she could be whoever she wanted to be. And now being told, like, you have to sit in this box and do what everybody tells you is very hard for her. But, it just kind of, it goes against what she was raised. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think that's interesting. I identify as woman, her, pronouns, but I like men's clothes, and throughout my life, I've worn like girly femme clothes, whatever you want to call it, but then switched gears, I guess, in my 30s when I think I never thought about what people thought about me as a big deal, but then, and when I got older and going through some personal issues, I'm like, I don't care anymore what anyone has to say, including my family. like the outside world I never had a problem with, but it was my family I cared about and what they thought, you know? So I was always told, like, don't cut your hair short. You're too heavy. It's not going to look right. And I'm like, but I want short hair, you know? A lot of things so that weren't very supportive. And when I started wearing men's clothing, it was like, oh, you look like my brother, you know, hearing that from my father. And I'm like, okay. Just comments that just were not good. And when I call them out on it, you know, of course they don't want to hurt me, and it's not like something they meant to hurt me, but, and they apologize, but it's like, it doesn't change. The behavior doesn't change. So it's interesting to hear when people are actually going through a transition, what they experience, but then also how, even if you're not with your identity, just whatever your appearance is. So I never had so many problems when I wasn't stereotypically appearing as gay. Like Mark said, I like hiding my sexuality. I wasn't trying to, but I just kind of wore what I was raised to wear. Like I remember being a kid wanting work boots and being told, no, those aren't for you, you know. Now I get my black Timberlands and I'm very happy. So so yeah, it's just very interesting, your appearance versus your identity, and just like what you're like conditioned to do or not do as you grow up. And I give myself a mohawk. I love, that's my favorite hairstyle. I have to be honest. And my mom was like, do you hate yourself? And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, like stuff like that. And then she's like, if you want to transition, that's just going to devastate me. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so what if I did want to? What's the big deal? You know? So I just think part of my purpose here is to like build tolerance or educate my own family even. It's been a rough road that way. So just offering that as it's not just trans people either. It's even just, you know, your own appearance, because there's that perception of putting you in a certain lane, you know, gender wise.
Yeah, I have to remind myself that, you know, even as a gay male, like I have to try not to project my own fears or what I was conditioned to hiding so well on my children, you know. So like my youngest loves his fingernails painted and his toenails, and that's, you know, I was okay with that. And then I went to take him to buy a bicycle, and we were in the store, and I was, you know, getting the big, real manly bicycles I wanted him to ride. He was, of course, you know, 5.5 years old, and he picked out this pink purple with tassels, and I didn't say anything. I was, you know, of course I was like, okay, you like that one, but why don't you try this one over here? You know, he's like, I don't want to try it. I like this one. I like the way it rides. But you haven't tried it yet. Like, try it. And I kept trying to push him into what I wanted him to ride. You know, I'm thinking, I'm the gay guy here. I should be like, absolutely, you want to, you know, and I wasn't. And I realized that was my own fear of what I was conditioned to, and I didn't want him to like. So he really wanted to pick this purple bike, and I said, okay, if that's really what you want, then we'll get it. And of course, I snap a picture of it and I send it to my husband. I'm like, what am I going to do? You know, he really wants to buy this bike. Am I really going to walk out of here with it? And, you know, so of course I did. And I was all excited. And as soon as I got home, I went to all the kids in the neighborhood and said, don't you say anything about that bike to that boy, you know? And of course, like 6 months later, he's like, I don't like this bike anymore. It's not the right color. And I'm looking at my older son going, did you say anything to him? I'll kill you. But, you know, it's like I realized that it just shocked me as a gay person that I would be worried about that, you know? And I have to kind of remind myself that those are my fears. I don't need to project them onto them. And, you know, so it's great to hear that.
I remember once one of the trips to go clothes shopping with Evan. I had an opportunity to do it, and I remember he made a beeline for the girls section, the women's section. And I said, Evan, no, guy stuff over here. Why don't we go over there? And he goes, why? And I said, well, that's the boys, that's the men's section, you know? And he goes, look at the colors. And I said, what? And he goes, it's just gray, brown, black. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, now look over there. And of course, you have the whole range of the rainbow of colors, right? Okay, like every single color imaginable. And he's like, those are way better colors. And I was like, you know what? I can't argue with you. You know, what am I going to, you know? And it's funny because we'd walk to checkout, and I'm putting these clothes on the counter, and the checkout person, if they're younger, they didn't bat an eye, but if it's someone slightly older, they look at Evan, who has this kind of shaggy longish hair, but not quite yet. He still looks like a boy, and I'm like, is this for him? And they say like that. And I remember being ashamed of the fact that I was somewhat embarrassed by that, that I would have to say, yes, it's for him. And again, it goes back to, he's absolutely right. These are way better colors than the crap that, we only get to choose 3 colors.
Mm-hmm.
And so, going back to what like Julie said about recognizing, how we present ourselves, what we wear. I mean, if it wasn't for Evan, my hair wouldn't be green today, and I'm not doing that, to copy him or to, I mean, he doesn't dye his hair or anything like that. But the reality is, in his choosing to dress the way he did, he was expressing an honesty about himself. And it made me realize that, so much of my sense of how to present myself had been limited by these notions of masculinity, and the freedom that I experience. I mean, it's funny, I'm wearing black, right now, but it's like a lot of the times, I'm just like wearing whatever, and it's, I used to wear just gray, black, and white. Okay, because I was a pissed off punk rocker, and being happy is not allowed. And you would never see me wearing any color, because colors are bad, right? Because they're too emotional, blah, 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 blah. And he made me realize how stupid that stance is, so.
Hey, I have a question about that. So because I had a similar experience in the checkout, and my immediate reaction is like, how dare that person ask that question? That is just so ignorant or rude. But I have to remind myself that sometimes it's not. It's like, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I'm so quick to judge someone if they question my decision as a parent or my children.
Yeah.
And maybe that person was just asking, maybe they weren't judging, or because I feel like the older generation, myself, maybe they are not asking to be mean, or maybe they're just curious, or you know what I mean? So I feel like when you were telling that story, my immediate reaction, I got angry, at that checkout person. I was taking the clothes and throwing it at them, but I have to remind myself that just because someone asks a question doesn't mean they're judging it. Maybe they just don't know. I mean, it wouldn't be something that I would do, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Maybe they just need to know the answer. Yes, it is for him, and that's it.
I think it comes from a place of confusion, honestly, because I don't want to speak too optimistically, but I think we're living in a time when a lot of the boundaries are being challenged and being tested, and the idea of accepting people who are different, even despite the politics of the past 4 years, I think the reality is that acceptance is growing rather than shrinking on the whole. That's the impression I get, and it may be a privileged, delusional position, but ideologies that are deeply rooted.
I 100% agree with that. I 100% agree with that. Yeah, because I mean, who knew? I mean, I think we all knew as growing up that there were those kids at school who might have been gay and then came out in college. I mean, never mind transgender. You know what I mean? So I totally agree with you, and I credit the kids because they're all very accepting. But to them it's like whatever.
Well, but the older generations, right? Because it was always the younger clerks are always fine. It's the older clerks who seem, and I think what's happening is their ideology has just been thrown something that does not fit, and that just creates a lot of confusion. I think a lot of times, the questions are not coming out of hatred or malice, but it is literally confusion. Like it's like 1 + 1 = something else now. Wait, what just happened? This is, why didn't you buy the brown pants? It's like,
I think sometimes too, like, I think it's fine if people ask questions. I think it's about how they ask and what their reaction is to what you say too. that kind of makes a difference. You know, like my grandmother, she's passed now, but she was always curious. Like if she didn't quite understand something, she would ask about it and I would explain it. And
Yeah.
I always felt like it was coming from a place of love and wanting to know me and understand me, you know, so I had no problem talking to her and kind of educating and even going along, like the video at the beginning of this session, knew nothing about Baba. I think it's amazing. You know, even as a gay person, I'm always learning too. And even when we started Scituate Pride, we didn't have the IA plus in there, and I just jumped online and just did some research and said, hey guys, we got to update this. So I think it, not like the lack of knowing, the ignorance in that is okay, but I think it's about the people's approach and how they come at you about it, you know. And I think you do know based on the vibe usually where it's coming from or how, I guess you could say. That's my experience at least.
It has changed a lot. I mean, just reading the program tonight, there was so much terminology on there. I have no idea. Like, it wasn't until my neighbor was doing something online, he said, I'm cisgender. And I'm looking at my husband going, what's cisgender? And this was just a few weeks ago, you know? I have no idea what cisgender was. Why don't I not know that, you know? And then going through the program, I saw like two spirits or something, and I'm looking, I'm going, I'm so out of touch with the world today. It's so much has changed just from you know, in the last 7 years, and I think it's awesome. And this conversation and participating in this has made me realize, wow, I need to, you know, I gotta start joining and doing learning a little bit more. It's amazing. It's, you know, just a few years ago my nephew said he had a friend in school that came out, and it shook my world to the core. I thought, he's 12. You know, first, I don't even know how you know your sexuality at 12, but you know, it's like to be able to feel comfortable to come out in school at the age of 12 is just blows my mind. And it makes me feel so grateful that that's where this has come, because back in the 80s and 90s and, you know, 2000s, for me, it was not like that at all. So to see that how much it's advanced is just, it's wonderful to see.
I would like you guys' thoughts on this. This is something I've observed just over the years, but I feel like gay women were accepted easier than gay men. I feel like trans female to male easier accepted than male to female. From the reactions I've seen in the community and people not in the community, and it's just really sad to me that, like, I think it's good that there's been progress constantly, but like at the same time, why is one, you know, person or group more accepted or easier accepted than another? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
That's men, right? I mean, men, you know, I can remember growing up and be like, oh yeah, you know, the guys would be like, 2 lesbians, yeah, that's great, you know, but 2 men, forget it. So
Right.
I think it's really about masculinity and kind of a male dominated perception of what's acceptable and what's definitely not acceptable. But I think
I think I would agree. I think lesbians and, you know, F to M transgender are not as threatening somehow. And, you know, when you kind of turn that stereotype a little bit, it you know, makes people very uncomfortable. It can make people uncomfortable, I think.
Lauren and I just finished reading a book called Queer History of America. And I think Michael Bronsky is the author. And it offers a very interesting reading of LGBTQIA plus history in America. But I think lesbianism is seen as a novelty, whereas the gay man was stereotyped as being weak and therefore a threat to the male masculine ideal. I think, and just following up, you know, as Mark pointed out, you know, because masculinity has centralized, someone who transitions away from masculinity is seen like a traitor. It's like an apostate to the church. You know, you don't, how dare you act as if this is not something that you want, that would be wanted, you know, because ultimately, you know, at the center of that kind of toxic masculinity is an insecurity, right? It's always a fear of failing, the fear of being weak, the fear of being seen as something other than alpha. And here you have someone saying, forget it, I'm done with this bullshit. Excuse me. You know,
Right.
but
So I'm going to pose a question that the audience has put forth. It says, do you have any ideas how Situate can become more inclusive? For example, changing Board of Selectmen to Select Board.
Yeah.
Anyone want to take that one?
So I was there when that motion was discussed, and I was actually surprised. I shouldn't have been, but I was surprised by the opposition to that change from going from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. I think language matters, and you know, there are people who will say, oh, you're all for censorship and policing language. It's, you know, as someone who teaches language and use of language, the reality is language is always it's not even policed. We always set boundaries on what is acceptable language, what is not acceptable language. So I think for me, making sure that, you know, we don't allow for casual uses of slurs, anti-gay slurs, you know, or racial slurs or anything like that, you know, just as a matter of cultural practice. Don't give any quarter to that, because the moment you start using those terms, they get a foothold, and then it starts up that ideology again. So for me, my perspective on the project of creating a much more accepting town has a lot to do with the language. And so, for example, changing from selectmen to select board, I think is a step in the right direction. You know.
I like that. I fish. That's why I have my tackle box fishing school. I want to teach people how to fish, but even just saying fisherwoman, it sounds weird. You know, it's like fisherman is just like what's said. It's like, what can I say that's just neutral, you know?
Fisher.
Fisher. I'm a fisher.
Fisher. Yeah. Yeah.
That's true. Anyone want to add to that, or I have another question from the audience? If not, no. Okay. Thank you, Itai. How would you like to see the schools better support your child? Any great stories of how your friends or children's friends responded to coming out?
I would share, I guess, from my son's experience, the gender neutral bathroom situation. I think that, you know, when we had our preliminary discussion with the school, when he came out, and, you know, kind of moving forth, there was going to be access to a gender neutral bathroom, somewhere to change, you know, for gym, but none of that really materialized. It's kind of hard to use the bathroom when it's locked 9 out of 10 times, and, you know, when an adult's there locking it right behind them after they've used it. So that, you know, I think creating a more of an inclusive space, that's key, and there needs to be more of them in the school. You know, that's one big thing that I guess, you know, made for a tough time for my kid being there. You know, just wasn't really, it was a little bit of lip service and not really like, hey, this bathroom's for you, you can use it whenever you want, you know. That's one couple of things I would suggest.
Nice.
Maybe, you know, I know some of the teachers do this, but maybe even getting, you know, at the beginning of the year, or, you know, getting the kids to introduce themselves with their pronouns. So she, her, hers, he, his, and then, or especially, you know, some kids who are starting to, or maybe non-binary, you know, the they, them. I think that's also something else that might be helpful, so that people were, they do it at my work, you know, people's names are up on, you know, in the telephone book, and it does have their gender identity in there too.
I think that's key, because it doesn't necessarily out somebody either. If everybody in the whole class is going to do it, that's a huge,
Right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great practice. I'm Wiccan, and we have public rituals, and we'll have, I mean, sometimes 50 people there, and making introductions. That's always something we have people include in introducing themselves. And that was actually in that group the first time I experienced doing that, and I thought it was really awesome. So it's definitely just socially anywhere it can be done, and the whole introducing yourself context, I think, is a good thing, you know.
I'm gonna, at the risk of sounding completely ignorant, I don't know what the binary. So I see some name that say they, them, he, him, and I don't understand what that is. I would imagine maybe there are other people on the call that don't understand.
So it's how you identify. So your sexual identity, like for me, it's she, her, hers. So
Okay.
it's just like, what pronouns do you want to be called on the spectrum? And they, them is like, you don't want to go by a male or female. It's both. Like, people can add to this too, but that's kind of the beginning of understanding that, like, that it's a spectrum. It's not, and how you identify is your personal, your own personal decision, and like, it's your own identity. So it varies between everybody. Some people don't like, they might not be, you know, gay. It's different than sexuality. It's your identity, and it's personal to you, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Does anyone else
If you
have
don't
anything else to
identify as
offer?
male or female, then you would use the they, them.
Yeah, if you're, they call it being gender neutral. Like, like in the video, when we first, in the introduction, one of them, it's Baba, they go by.
Mhm.
They don't identify as male or female, so they don't want to be called dad or mom. You know what I mean? So Baba is that neutral, gender neutral
Okay.
term as a parent. That was new to me too. Like, I thought that was amazing. I never heard that before we found this video for this session. So it's definitely, like you said before, a constantly evolving thing. And I'm glad you asked the question, Mark. That's really good, because I have to look up what the two-spirited means after, you know, reading that myself. You know what I mean? So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I don't want to get it wrong. So that's
Yeah.
good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add to that explanation? I just threw in my 2 cents.
I had a student, she's in grad school now, but she was going by a different pronoun at the start. And I remember as she transitioned over the years, we're still in touch. And she was an incredible resource in helping me understand, and allowing me to make the mistakes early on, you know, because those habits, you know, just they're hard to break. But it really is about, the way Danny explained it was that it was about her taking ownership of her own identity rather than having other people impose an identity on her. And you know, by exercising her authority to say, no, refer to me by the pronoun that I choose, it's kind of like me saying, no, pronounce my name's weird, and it's been a problem. Well, not a problem. It is what it is, you know. It's okay for me to.
I've had to look at your name like 3 times on my phone because I'm like, what is it again? I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah. No. and it just in the same way, you know, that I would say it's okay for me to ask that people pronounce my name correctly. I think it's absolutely fair for that my student to say, refer to me as she, you know.
Yeah, I like when people ask. Like, I met someone at one of my rituals who asked me, because I wear men's clothes and I have short hair. So he was like, he's a trans female to male himself, but he didn't want to make any assumptions about me. So he was like, pronouns? What are your pronouns? You know, and I was like, what? So that's kind of how I learned that was, you know, something that you needed to kind of identify now. And I was like, oh, okay. So I thought about it and just let him know. And he's like, thank you, you know, for telling me. So again, it's, and when in transitioning too, one of my really great friends from college, and I lived with him too, transitioned from female to male. We played rugby together, and at the time he was female, but then came out and told us he was transitioning. So that was a good experience to like kind of be introduced to that. That was my first like hands-on experience. But in the transition process and getting hormones, from going through it with my friend, you don't look necessarily what you want to look like right away. It's a process over time. And a lot of me identifying as a butch lesbian, some people assume that I'm trans, and I'm not. And I don't get offended because I understand why people might think that. But I'm not. So it's like always good to ask and not assume, because I could be trans and just starting the process. So I'm not, having enough hormones yet to get to where I want to be. So it's very interesting when you look at it that way. Just it's always good not to assume and ask. Anybody else have anything on this one? I have another question here. Ooh, more coming in, sorry. So there was a question about, is there any particular LGBTQIA+ book or author you would like to see as part of the elementary, middle, or high school curriculum? It's a good question.
That is a good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's that? When we adopted our boys, they gave us that book by, I'm going to butcher it, Todd something, This Is a Family. And you know who I'm talking about? Got the big colorful pictures and talks about different families and different, anyway, something like that would be for the elementary school.
Yeah, I thought of that too. I don't have a specific book, but I've seen them describing just how families are different.
Yeah.
And again, my focus is primarily on the trans, but I think Janet Mock's biography was very good. And then Becoming Nicole, that's not good for the high school kids. That's more, but I think the Janet Mock book is, I've heard is very good too, her biography.
I'm going to go sort of old school and say James Baldwin.
Oh yeah, Giovanni's Room is great. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of his writings, and I think just the intersectionality that he offers there, I think is
Sorry, I'm hearing from my wife. She said my book, but I have two children's books I've put out. I don't know why she's saying that. It's ABCs, but I think just because I'm a gay author, maybe, or illustrator, so to speak.
Oh, you should plug them. Come on. A plug.
TT's ABCs Under the Sea, and my daughter, because that's one of her nicknames, and TT's ABCs Under the Canopy. So it's illustrations of A to Z creatures from under the sea on one, and then the other one, A to Z creatures in the rainforest. And it has pictures, of us, and I dedicated the book to my kids and all that. So, yeah.
Great. Didn't know that.
Yeah, and I do want to do more children's books that are around these issues too. I just want to be careful about it and make sure I do research first. But yeah, it's fun to self-publish on Amazon. You can go to Amazon and get them. We have another question from the audience. As a clinical social worker, I like to hear about access to mental health, including quality of therapy. I can mention Fenway. Fenway, they have a dinner every year for fundraising, and my roommate and friend, when he was transitioning, it was really, really hard for him to get the proper treatment for hormones. And when he went to Fenway, he was finally taken care of properly and had good quality health care. He was from the Cape, Marston's Mills and Hyannis area. And like the doctors just didn't understand really what was going on. And there were some issues with the things that he was prescribed. He couldn't even get covered in coverage. And he saved up, $10,000 on his own to get his breast removed. So watching him go through that, definitely an issue, but Fenway is and Boston is a great resource. And I feel like the quality of care they offer is really good. And they have all the resources you need, and they really cater to, I'm not sure, this is just my own personal knowledge. I'm not sure if there's anyone better than them. I'd like to hear it if so, but they really cater to the trans community and helping them properly transition in a safe way, the safest way possible. At least that's my experience with my friend.
We started going to Fenway, I'm trying to think, back in maybe June. We had first been on track to go to Children's Hospital, and this was just starting, and then COVID happened, and it was kind of like everything came to a screeching halt. But although, you know, their facilities, I'm sure it's wonderful, their model of timing was going to be so slow for us that where my kid was at and needed to get to, it was just not going to work for us. You know, it was just not going to, mentally, physically, all that, it was not going to be a good fit. So we did go to Fenway, and we've been there since, and it was kind of like the same thing. We had our first appointment after several virtual ones in town, and it was just like this sense of like welcoming comfort, like, okay, they know their stuff, they know what they're doing, you know. And my son, you know, was like, all the stuff on the walls, it was like, this is all about me, you know. Like, I go to my doctor's office and it's like, check for ticks, you know, and it's like, you know, all this, like, I mean, not that we shouldn't be checking for ticks, but, you know, it was kind of like some generic stuff that wasn't so tailored to you know, the LGBTQ plus community. So I just wanted to second that we've so far had a really great experience in there, and I definitely would recommend that as well.
That's good to hear from someone who's actually in it themselves, because I was an onlooker, you know, so that's really great. I know that, you know, healthcare disparities with the community, the trans community, is huge. It's a huge problem. I'm hoping by now it's getting better and better, but I used to work at Mass General Hospital, and I was part of them starting their employee resource group for the LGBTQIA plus community. And it was my first time marching in Pride, was with Mass General. And we always had a week, a health week in every year, where we set up booths and covered all these different health topics where there are disparities in healthcare. So like with my friend who grew up on the Cape, like, hormones can be very dangerous if it's not done properly, you know. And he experienced that, you know. It's really, you have to be taken care of properly. So Mass General does a good job at creating that awareness and supporting closing that gap of those disparities, so to speak. So that's another place that I think, I'm not saying it's perfect, but they're making strides to constantly improve. And again, working in healthcare IT, I built a system called Epic, where most of the major hospitals are on it. And part of building registration is making sure there's places to put what their pronouns are. And that was a huge thing on just building the system. And when people go live on it, making sure that it's inclusive when you're registering patients. So you're, they have a birth name, but then what's their name now? What do they want to be called? And then obviously updating it if they legally change it. So I know that healthcare in general is progressing, but I'm sure it has a long way to go, and it just depends, you know. Obviously the city offers more in the affiliates of the city hospitals, at least in Massachusetts that I've experienced, are a little better with it so far. All right. Anyone else have anything on that? I'm going to ask another question. We have 5 minutes left. It's 7:25. I just want to put that out there. This has been really great so far. We have a good amount of questions to get to. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, getting told one more question. There's a comment here. It says Trans Lifeline is amazing. It's a support and crisis hotline. Also, Plume is a medical and health resource of trans people. Just want to put that out there. Someone commented on that. With this, Was it difficult to have kids? Were adoption agencies willing and able? That's one question. Thinking maybe Mark can jump on that.
What? Say the question again. Read it again.
There's a question that says, was it difficult to have kids, and were adoption agencies, willing and able, based on, I'm assuming based on you and Thomas,
Yeah, I mean,
two dads.
yeah, we didn't really experience a problem with the state. You know, at that time, not all states were allowing same-sex adoptions. Like Florida was one of them. We didn't find. I mean, we didn't really have any difficulty in terms of accepting gay parents. I don't know if we were removed from other opportunities for other children. You know, I don't know what happened behind the scenes or what was going on behind the scenes, but for us, we didn't really experience any difficulty in terms of discriminating because we were a same-sex family. I think, you know, the process is very difficult, but I think the process, whether it's through the foster care system or private adoption agencies or international adoptions or IVF, and I mean, it's all of them have their own unique pros and cons and challenges and difficulties, but we didn't experience any difficulty in terms of same-sex family.
Thank
So
you.
that's good.
I also want to put out another comment that was made, which is a really good point. Just because someone is non-gender conforming doesn't mean that they can't use he, she pronouns. Just to put that out there. Don't assume that if someone's non-binary that they use they, them necessarily. So again, it's always safe to ask and not assume. So that's a really good point, because our conversation could have led people to believe that a little bit. So thank you. We have time for another question, so let's see. I think we've covered a lot. Does anyone have any other questions that you want, or anything else you want to say from the panel? We do have something, someone just put in, was it difficult to have kids?
Kids are a pain. No, sorry.
I can speak.
We bought into the straight world. I'll tell my husband sometimes, I would go, why do we buy into this straight world? Why do we have to get married and have kids? These kids are driving me crazy. But they are wonderful.
No.
Yeah, I think for me, watching my wife do the IVF treatment and just the whole process was unbelievable. It upsets me and it kind of irks me. Not kind of, it does. Like the process you have to go through with your doctors in order to have things covered. Like you have to try X amount of things before IVF is covered. It's, I just think healthcare and like the reimbursement and like the whole cost issues and all that needs to be reworked completely. And it's not just, I'm assuming obviously it's not just gay people, anyone using IVF, straight, gay, whatever. I'm sure that everyone has that same kind of sequence, and I just don't think it's really fair. Some of the things you have to go through to get it done. And I just give my wife a lot of credit because she's done it twice, and I can't even think about doing it. I would rather adopt, to be honest. But that's me. But I'm very thankful for the two I have. All right, well, it's almost 7:30, it's 7:29 and some seconds. I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight, from the community and the panelists for opening up and offering your honest feedback and answers to our questions. And you can go to SituatePride.com and check out more, and we'll be announcing and posting on our Facebook and website our next panel coming up. Again, we're doing one per quarter, so our next one's coming up in February. And feel free to reach out to us too, Scituate Pride, if you, for example, the curriculum question, I feel like that was on the spot, and it'd be great to get those suggestions, because we can definitely let the school committee know if you guys have suggestions and anything that you feel can be done to improve our community and just being here in the community. We can definitely take and do what we can about it. You know, that's part of why we're here and why we put this together. So
Thank you, Sheena, for running it. And Stephanie, thank you for the security.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you.